But we're starting the show with some breaking news coming in. China is daring India once again, hitting out at the Indian Army Chief General Bipin Rawat for his recent remarks that Doklam is a disputed territory. The Chinese military asserted that it is very much part of China. The Chinese military went on to say that India should draw lessons from the 73-day standoff to avoid similar incidents in the future. WION senior correspondent Raghvendra Rao joining me live from the newsroom for more on that story. Raghvendra, put this in context for us. We thought in some ways the Doklam standoff was behind us, but clearly it's being used as leverage by China once again.
Absolutely, Aisha, and what was thought as a matter which had been diplomatically resolved between both the sides, it continues to simmer on, and despite both sides having disengaged with each other from the exact standoff site where they were locked in an eyeball-to-eyeball conflict for almost 73 days, the matter is far from resolved. We have witnessed in the past few weeks that the Chinese military presence from near the standoff site has not diminished the way it used to during winter months. In fact, they have been creating infrastructure just a fair distance away from the standoff site, but in the same area. And now this, the Defense Ministry spokesperson of the People's Liberation Army, now going on to criticize General Bipin Rawat's remarks, saying Doklam is a disputed territory. And the fact that the Chinese side is asserting very clearly that Doklam is a territory which belongs to China and that India should learn lessons from that 73-day-long standoff. One thing is very clear: what had been thought to be resolved at that time, clearly it's far from that.
Absolutely, and the diplomatic parleys at that point had indicated that this is something that India and China are keen to put behind them. In fact, all the exchanges that have taken place have been to that effect. Stay with me, Raghvendra. I'm joined on the phone also by Atul Aneja. He's joining us from Beijing. He's the Hindu's correspondent in China. Atul, thanks so much for speaking with us here at WION. China, of course, taking offense to what the Indian Army chief has said. But do you find, the language once again extremely provocative, saying that India should draw lessons from the 73-day standoff, and also going on to say that that's the best way to avoid quote-unquote similar incidents in the future?
Well, this is exactly the language which was used by their foreign ministry about a week ago, again in response to a question. So there is no change in language at all. When the question was asked regarding the photographs and the satellite imagery which had emerged in the Indian media showing fresh construction in the rear of the area of disengagement. So this was exactly the response, and this is also a repetition of the very response. This question which was asked of them at the Defense Ministry briefing, I just want to clarify this, that they usually have a Defense Ministry briefing once a month. And there is one Indian correspondent who is allowed to be a part along with the rest of the foreign media. So all responses which have come are not suo moto, but in response to questions that were asked of the Defense Ministry spokesperson. So I think it's important to get the context right. And also, the only thing which I think is new is a reference to General Rawat's remarks regarding the neighborhood, and we should not allow that to drift away from us. In response to that, the Foreign Ministry spokesperson has said that that reflects a Cold War mentality. Now, this is a new line which has come today. Otherwise, the rest of the formulation is exactly the same which the Chinese Foreign Ministry had said a few days ago.
Fair enough. Thanks for drawing that distinction for us, Atul, something that I'm sure our viewers have taken note of. But keeping that in mind, looking also at the fact that this is just the start of the year, and there have been skirmishes along the India-China line of actual control, and of course China has reiterated its sovereignty in certain areas, which has been uncomfortable for India to just take into its stride. Also, when it comes to Doklam, though, there is the Bhutan factor also that has to be taken into consideration. Do you think that this is just going to boil up passions once again, the way we'd seen them in the Doklam standoff, which lasted a long 73 days?
My sense is that is not going to happen, because if you see very carefully, there is an area of disengagement where the face-off took place, right? there is no fresh construction in that. So we actually stick to the deal which took place, which caused the disengagement just before the BRICS summit last September. So now the question arises, is there fresh construction in the rear areas leading to this area of disengagement? Now that is something we need to keep track of. But either side, frankly, there is no reference to that in the agreement with the Chinese on what we do with the rear areas. You talk about the question of Bhutan. I think that is important because, we always have maintained that the tri-junction areas, A, that this is Bhutanese territory, and B, the tri-junction area is something which we need to clarify during our dialogue. And this was a part of the special representative talks which we have had in 2012. So that issue remains as it is. So that's not been, but as far as raising passions is concerned, I don't think that's really my sense, because parallelly other developments are taking place. For example, Prime Minister Modi's speech at Davos, the Chinese yesterday welcomed that wholeheartedly when Prime Minister Modi spoke against protectionism. And today, it's interesting, the foreign ministry spokesperson was asked about the India and ASEAN meeting which is taking place in New Delhi. And the Chinese have consciously welcomed that as well and have stated by implication that there is no zero-sum game when it comes to the development of the entire region. So these remarks coming from China as well needs to be complemented with what has come as a response to a question in the Defense Ministry briefing today. So if we take a holistic picture, you can say that there are mixed signals coming, but frankly, the Defense Ministry briefing, nothing would have come out had no question been asked.
Absolutely.
That's my sense.
Absolutely. Stay with me, Atul. That's a really interesting point, Raghvendra, that Atul is, raising. That if we look at both, kinds of statements that have been forthcoming from China, one, of course, in response to the question on General Rawat's comment, vis-a-vis the more positive outlook towards Prime Minister Modi's comments in Davos and, cautious optimism about the India-ASEAN commemorative summit, just goes to show that this is, in some ways, China's continued policy of keeping things on balance as well.
Well, yes, keeping things in balance and also keeping things simmering in a way, because, it seems to be a very carefully thought out strategy. It seems to be a very carefully crafted strategy, because every now and then we are witnessing some statement or some, provocation or the other from the Chinese side. We have been reporting in the past about the increased military activity on the Chinese side near the actual Doklam face of sight, post the standoff was called off and post the disengagement. And we have been witnessing that, every now and then the Chinese side has been making certain comments which would make it appear that from their side the matter is far from over, and it probably is an attempt to keep it boiling till the winters are over. And although yes, it may be a little far-fetched to suggest or say that we could see a repeat of the standoff we witnessed last year, but clearly the Chinese are not backing off yet.
Absolutely. So that whole strategy of you give a little, you get a little, I suppose, still in play. We leave it at that. Raghvendra Rao, Atul Oneja, thanks both for taking out the time to discuss that story with us. One, of course, that we'll keep a track of here on WION.